Today's topic, we're going to talk about fueling. Now we're going to talk specifically about fueling for power athletes. So that's more of like your volleyball players, your football players, your repeated bout type basketball players, etc. So not a cross-country runner or a distance runner or a swimmer, someone who would primarily be considered an endurance athlete. But fueling for power athletes has a couple of guidelines that really improve performance, and when not followed, really affect performance. And so with that said, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that for power athletes, the primary means with which they derive energy is through glycolysis. So the breakdown of glycogen, or basically sugar, in their muscle. And so carbs are king when it comes to fueling as a power athlete. If your physical sport that you participate in is one of repeated intense bouts, or even one of sustained bouts, but something that doesn't last longer than 45, 60 minutes, you kind of are a power athlete. And so in the sense of carbs being your main source of fuel. And so a lot of the equations we're going to talk about have to do with carb consumption, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of talk about carnivore diets or keto diets, and for health perspectives, that's a different thing. We can talk about that and whether or not that has efficacy to it or support in the research. But from a athletic endeavor, trying to be a better wrestler, trying to be a better football player, we have to acknowledge that carbs are just optimal for that. With that said, there's certain quantities of carb consumption that seem to be ideal. And we base it off of body weight, because body weight then factors in quantity for different people. So a 200-pound male is going to need to consume more than a 150-pound male. But also, we kind of have ratios and ranges, because two 150-pound males aren't the same. One person might have a higher carb tolerance and or a higher carb need. The other one might be a little more efficient and not need as much, get a little more gastric, intestinal discomfort with that higher amount of carbs, and performs just optimally in maybe the lower range of carbs. So when we're talking about carb consumption with athletes, we have the total amount of daily carbs you consume. We have the amount of carbs you consume right before a lift or a workout or a game, and we have the amount of carbs you consume right after. And those are kind of the three variables we care about. We care about, in the day, do you just get enough energy? Before your game, meet, etc., or practice, are you getting enough energy? And then are you refueling with enough energy? And so we base it off of weight, and those ranges I'll tell you, but you don't really have to remember those. Daily, we want about 2.7 to 3.6 grams per pound. But no one's going to sit there and actually look at some nutrition label and be like, is this adding to my 2.7 grams per pound? It's a little cerebral. It's kind of like weighing your food. No one's going to do it. Is it optimal if someone did it for you? Yeah, but like, we're human beings, and so we don't do that. And so a lot of what we do is we measure based off of quantities you can easily calculate, like a fist. And so we know that a fist is about 40 to 45 grams of carbs. So if you know that, you can just look at a meal that has carbs in it, and you can, based off of the size of a fist, quantify, oh, that's like 2 fists of carbs. And if you know how many fists of carbs you need for the day, you can then easily add that up, okay? So we have total daily carbs, which, let's take an example of like a 180-pound high school boy. With that 2.7 to 3.6 range, really what that comes out to is about 480 to 650 grams of carbs a day. Now, for a normal person who works a 9-to-5 desk job, isn't necessarily too active, or works out 3 days a week at the gym for like 45 minutes, you're never going to need that many carbs. But for a football player who's got 2-hour practices 5 days a week and a game on Friday, they are going to need that many or that much carbs to actually ideally perform. Now, will they perform on 300 grams of carbs? Yes. But will they perform better? Will they recover better? Will their tissue stay healthier? Will their nervous system stay more primed and ready to go? Will their energy levels be more consistent throughout the week? Yes. So if we take that example of like 480 grams of carbs, and we remember that a fist is like 40 to 45 grams, we can kind of just chalk it up to the idea that a fist, or 10 to 11 fistfuls a day of carbs, is kind of like the lower end of that, and 13 to 14 fistfuls of carbs is kind of like the higher end of that, and anywhere in between works. So if we take that same 180-pound athlete and we want to quantify what his pre-exercise or practice or game carb consumption should be, we know it should be somewhere around 0.5 gram to 1.4 grams a day. So again, that person would need about 90 to 250 grams of carbs 3 to 4 hours before they are in a game or practice is starting. And so you want to have it 3 to 4 hours before, so it actually has time to digest and you don't have a lot of food in your stomach. And the range is kind of broad, but that's because people respond to different amounts. And so what I usually advise is, hey, learn that, okay, if 90 grams is the lower end for that 180-pound male, and that's 2 fists, and then 250 is closer to like 5 fistfuls of carbs, you are going to want to play with that. Start on the lower end, have 2 fistfuls of carbs the meal before you exercise or before you practice. See how you feel. Then try 3 fistfuls. Then try 4 fistfuls. At a certain point, it's going to feel like too much food. And you'll be like, I don't know, I just still felt it in my stomach. I felt like I was shoving it down my gullet. Like when practice came, I still felt like there was food in my stomach. You know you went too far. So drop right under that, and now you have found like your ideal level of consumption of carbs. And then post-workout or post-practice or a game, we want to get carbs in right away. For one, we've depleted the glycogen or the carbs within our muscles, and so we want to refill those up. But also what it does is when you consume a lot of carbs, or a decent amount of carbs, right after a workout when your glycogen's depleted, your body really wants to fill that glycogen back up in your muscles, and it produces a lot of insulin. And the thing about insulin is relatively anabolic, and or basically makes your body want to build muscle. So if you also consume some protein after a workout, not only do you fill up the carbs in your muscle, but the protein gets put into your muscle as well, and it helps your body recover quicker and build muscle tissue faster. Now that ratio of carbs to protein is kind of important. 3 to 4 parts carbs to 1 part protein is what is unequivocally just considered ideal. More protein than that, and you start not emptying that protein out of your stomach as quickly. And so also you don't need much protein right after a workout. You really need to replenish your carbs in your muscle, but you just need a little bit of protein to get into your muscles to start the processes of rebuilding your muscle. So if we have that like 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 ratio for that 180-pound male again, 90 grams of carbs, or 0.5 grams per pound post-workout is considered ideal. So 90 grams of carbs, which is about 2 fistfuls. We know that 2 fistfuls of carbs will check the box of carbs, and then we only need about 25 grams of protein. Most protein powders, which is the ideal way to consume protein post-workout, just because it quickly digests, and so it quickly gets into your bloodstream, quickly gets into your muscles, are usually 20 to 25 grams per serving. And so you realistically only need to have one serving of protein powder. I know a lot of high school boys are double scooping their protein powder, but at that point in your day, it's kind of obsolete. You don't need that extra protein. Your body's not going to utilize it, and you're kind of wasting it when you could just be like extending how long your protein bottle lasts for you.